Hello, I, Varada, welcome you to a new episode of Policy Room by Social Policy Research Foundation, a public policy think tank working on contemporary policy challenges across security, technology, gender, health, and more. Today, we are diving into a topic that's often up in the air, quite literally. We are talking about India's space security, what it means, why it matters, and where India stands in the global race for securing space. Joining me today is Dr. Chaitanya Giri. Dr. Chaitanya Giri is a fellow at ORF Center for Security, Strategy and Technology. His work focuses on India's space ecosystem and its interlinkages with the global space economy, academia and industry innovation, and training for emerging STEM domains and the evolving concepts of planetary security and One Health. Dr. Giri is a space policy expert who has worked closely with various government institutions, including the Niti Aayog. A former planetary scientist with NASA and the European Space Agency's Rosetta mission, he holds a PhD from the Max Planck Institute and the University of Nice. Welcome, Dr. Giri. It is absolutely my pleasure to have you here today.
It's my honor. Thank you.
Yeah. So let's quickly start from the beginning itself. So space security is a term that's gaining traction globally, but it is not everyone is not fully aware of what it entails. So let me ask you my first question. What is space security and why is it critical for national security today for every country, especially India?
Okay. So let me take you back to 2019, the end of March of 2019, around this time of the year. That was when suddenly one fine morning, sometime around 11 o'clock, Prime Minister Narendra Modi came on live television suddenly out of nowhere. And he announced that India has successfully conducted an anti-satellite test. Now, that very day, in his address to the nation, he mentioned that space has become a critical part of our everyday lives and therefore the national economy. Because right from very mundane, your navigation, position, timing systems that you use for your e-commerce website, for food delivery apps, to ATM machines from where you dispense money, all these instruments are quite intimately linked to satellites, to communication satellites, to position navigation timing satellites, colloquially known as GPS, as well as in our day-to-day lives, a lot of agencies that are government run, including private companies, are also dependent on Earth observation satellites. So be it disaster management, be it farming, be it public infrastructure, be it urban management. There are so many applications that are so intimately linked to space in our daily economic lives. And that's the reason why if anything happens to our assets in outer space, it will cripple a lot of downstream activities thereafter. So just imagine satellites shutting off completely and what would happen to all these systems that I just spoke of. It will create havoc. And that's the reason why you have space security becoming so crucial in our day-to-day lives, as well as from the point of view of national comprehensive security, including economic security. And therefore, and it's not just India. A lot of countries today are quite heavily dependent on satellites for many of their crucial economic activities. And therefore, whatever assets that you've kept in space, the well-being of these assets from avoiding any enemy encounters, adversarial encounters, as well as not losing these satellites, any of these satellites, to certain natural phenomena. So that natural phenomenon could be a storm that is emerging from the sun, uh, some high energy galactic cosmic rays coming from deep universe to Earth and hitting these satellites and damaging the electronics of these satellites, or even some of these satellites in a scenario if they could collide with each other, that would render a lot of downstream economy activities useless, and it will have a detrimental effect. So all these reasons cumulatively are leading us to talk more about space security. And here in India, we have taken it even much more seriously.
Yeah, thanks for the overview. And I think our satellite, our lives also revolve around satellites as well as the satellites revolve around Earth. But
Yes.
yeah. Now that we are thinking into it, the Indian context, there are growing vulnerabilities when it comes to satellites and our assets in the space. What do you think are the biggest threats to India's space assets today? Would you say they are more maybe cyber related, or it is more geopolitical, the anti-satellite weapons or the space militarization, or how do you see this?
So this is what I've been saying for a pretty long time, that India was amongst the last big countries or big powers to have carried out a kinetic anti-satellite test. There is no more a need of a kinetic anti-satellite test because there's no need for a weapon of that kind anymore. What has happened is your anti-satellite missile could be worth a few tens or a few hundreds of crores each. Okay. And if you have a satellite which is built for a puny few $1,000s, your target is much cheaper than your projectile. So the
Right,
cost benefit factor has completely skewed in favor of satellites. And
right,
that's why nobody would want to build a weapon that is more expensive than the target itself.
right,
Okay. Okay. So it's like sending the commander of the army first into the battlefield and letting all the soldiers behind. So
right,
you wouldn't want to do that. And for that very reason, it becomes very important to uh, any country, including us, to come across with a weapon that is much more cheaper. And in search of that cheaper weapon, cyber ASATs have become a priority for a lot of countries. Now, cyber is something, a cyber weapon of any kind is something that can come easily even to a country with a poor economy. So it does not need a comprehensive economic wherewithal. You need not be certain tens of thousands of dollars of a GDP. You need not be uh, a country with the top universities in the world. You need not be a country with all the banking and financial muscle power. You can be a small country, even an isolated one, economically isolated one, let's say like North Korea, to come up with a cyber weapon, and that cyber weapon can hit your satellites easily. And that has happened in the past. So a lot of North Korean offensive cyber actors have engaged in uh, disrupting a lot of satellites that belong to Western powers and countries that have been friendlier to Western powers, if not be colloquially West.
right.
So North Korean actors have done that. Perhaps countries like Iran, uh, uh, maybe countries like Ukraine at this point of time would be toying with an idea of using a cyber weapon since they are feeling threatened by, let's say, an Israel, or let's say they are facing threatened by the United States.
Yeah,
So cyber gives an added advantage to a country which does not have that projectile power, that kinetic kill power. Likewise, India also faces that kind of threat. But in the past few years, the West, especially the United States, has gone so humongously heavy on launching satellites, thanks to Elon Musk, that they have n number of assets now in outer space. Assets that belong to NASA, assets that belong to Pentagon, assets that belong to the various kinds of American private sector players. And there's a problem of plenty now.
yeah,
Which asset to target. So
right,
if I'm a nefarious actor, if I'm a non-state actor, I would pick and choose that, okay, I have a plethora of assets there, which one to choose, which one would cause the most damage.
right,
That's not the case with us. In our case, at certain point of time, we did boast of having a lot many satellites, we did have a large number of Earth observation satellites, which were large in, let's say, 10, 15, 20 years ago. But that's not the case anymore. Our cyber assets are, our satellite assets, our space assets are fewer, much fewer than a company like SpaceX, and they're heavy. We do not have many assets in the low Earth orbit, but we do have a lot of assets, let's say in the middle Earth orbit, or say 800 kilometers from the surface. Low Earth orbit is 200
Closer
kilometers
to, yeah.
closer. And you have several assets in the geostationary orbits, which is 36,000 kilometers up high.
Okay.
So it is possible to target a low Earth orbit satellite with an anti-satellite missile, but it is not possible to target a satellite which is 36,000 kilometers. So in that case, what would come to rescue, if anybody is wanting to target, would be a cyber weapon.
Right.
So that's the reason why we are right now more threatened by cyber attacks on our space infrastructure, and not just satellite, space infrastructure that is here on Earth, with all the ground stations.
Yeah.
Yeah. So our agencies are always they've upped their guard for preventing any sort of cyber offensive on us. And all these cyber attacks are geopolitical in nature. So there's no dichotomy between a cyber attack and a geopolitical attack.
Right.
A geopolitically motivated player will carry out a cyber
The
attack.
cyber attack also.
Yeah.
True.
So geopolitics is the motivation of any attack in outer space.
Right.
Because space is the high ground, and everybody, every country that aspires to be a superpower or who wants to exercise a show of strength would carry out an attack in outer space.
Right.
So that's the reason why our foremost threat at this point of time as a country is cyber attacks on our space infrastructure.
Right. So just because you said, but would you say then to have the satellites orbiting in the outer space rather than closer to the surface is better, or how does the science work?
No, it doesn't work that way. All your satellites are vulnerable. You have to ensure that your the data that you uplink from here, the data that is getting downlinked from the satellite to the ground station, in that transmission, on that transmission channel, that needs to be secured.
Right.
So that transmission channel could have data packets. It could have images coming and going up. It could have a certain set of commands that are being commanded by the command and control station. You wouldn't want somebody to come and interfere in your signaling.
Absolutely.
So that maintaining the integrity of that signaling, integrity of that transmission is very important. And for that very reason, today you have several technologies available that help with encryption of that kind of data sets.
Right.
So even if somebody wants to tamper with the transmission, they cannot penetrate and they cannot decrypt the signals that are going. So you are securing, you are creating a bulwark, you're creating a fortification around the data stream that is flowing. Because at the end of the day, a satellite is retrievable. You know, you can change a satellite just like a mobile phone, just like a hard disk.
Yeah.
But a data lost is of much greater value. And that's why, as they say, as once a big industrialist just said that data is oil.
Yeah.
So that holds true even in this case.
True.
That data is oil and data is really expensive. It is very valuable. So protection of data becomes very important.
Right. So now let's move from the threats aspect of it to capabilities. Globally, the countries are ramping up their space programs, civilian, military, both. How does India's space security setup compare to likes of maybe US or China? I think both these countries have very aggressive space presence and space policies. How does India match up to it?
So India doesn't really match up to both. And it does not even want to match up with the both. And there is a good reason for it. Reason number one is that, since the past 70 years, since the onset of the space age, it started with the game of one-upmanship. Earlier, it was the US and USSR, and today it is US and China. So in both the competitive, races, it was always that who's better than the other. Yeah. India for a very long time focused entirely on using the space program for its own, socioeconomic causes. It did not want to enter into a race because that would attract undue attention, undue attacks. We were too, our program, our capabilities were too nascent. In between, let's say, since the mid 1990s, after the economic liberalization, we had opened up our markets, but just before that, our markets, economy was on really shaky grounds. We had pledged our gold and many other things. So we were in need of a lot of jobs, and the economy was in doldrums. And a country whose economy was in doldrums wouldn't have afforded to get into any kind of race, which leads to nowhere, and which actually is a zero-sum game. So that was a very pragmatic move, is what I would say. But today, since we are now closely inching to become the third largest economy, uh, I'm not sure whether the American economy or the Chinese economy would stay as bloated as both these economies are at this point in time.
Yeah.
They will have to constrict, they'll have to shrink to a manageable size, a size that is manageable for both these countries. And if you then, let's say, ask me the same question 10 years from now,
Yeah.
things would be much different, where we would have, made some forays. Our economy would be much resilient. Not that it is not now today, but it would be more resilient even 10 years later. And then if you ask me, how does that stand? I would say that not getting into any kind of zero-sum game, it will always stand better. Because that zero-sum game consumes a lot of your energy. It leads to faster tech development. It leads to this immense spurt of growth, but it is unsustainable.
Right.
So even in the American case, from 1950s to early 2000s, it was largely run by select few American space contractors. And then suddenly Americans realized that no, we have to open it up. We have to open it to a lot of smaller players who have the capacities, but they do not match up to the old guard. So it was kind of a space Lutyens in the American case.
Yeah.
So it opened up, you had new players coming in, you had new startups. So the startup culture, even in the United States, although it is old, but it has picked up pace only after mid 2000s, early 2010s. That is when you saw companies like SpaceX, Blue Origin, Palantir, all those, they've come together, they've set up shops, they've built satellites, they've built rockets, they disseminate data, you can subscribe to data being an Indian, or even being, let's say, a Singaporean or a Emirati. Anybody in the world can subscribe to their data, and they earn the revenue out of it. So commercialization has only begun just 15, 20 years ago.
Right.
Now, if you ask me, where do we stand there? We are learning fast. We are learning fast. Indian government opened up the space sector just a few years ago. And by opening up that space sector, the Indian strategic thinkers are wanting to tap into the talent. Yes, we do have substantial engineering talent. We do have substantial tech, science, basic science, STEM talent in the country. We do have fantastic business personalities who could run futuristic businesses. But then all this is tied to geopolitics.
Right.
So letting certain tigers loose at the right set of time, right point of time is very important. And that is how, if we set them loose at the right point of time, we will attain advantages. And that is when we'll make great forays. Until then, it is nice to keep some of your veggies getting cooked on the back burner on slow flame.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was my next question. You spoke about the commercial aspect of it, private players coming into the space sector, and that was the question that the Indian space policy 2023 opened doors to private players and startups in the space area for India. How do you see this opening up this opening up of space sector to non-government entities impacting the national security aspect of it? Does it have any impact, or it is well guarded from the government side? What are the safeguards, so to say? Can you throw some light on this?
So, a lot of space companies, those who are building rockets, those who are building satellites, those who are providing services, uh, at the end of the day, all these services manufacturing are dual use in nature. We know it, the world knows it. It's just that we don't talk about it. Nobody talks about it. It is a understood fact.
True.
And when you're dealing with dual use, uh, it is quite obvious that the military might will contact you. It will give you contracts. It will ask you for certain propositions. It will ask you to design certain requirements that the military has. And these could be tactical requirements. You would need it once, you would need it for a certain period of time, you would not need it later on.
Yeah.
But can you provide certain bespoke requirements of the military? And if that is the case, then yes, your privatization drive, your commercialization drive, your liberalization of the space sector has become successful because it is not limited to civilian applications, but it has military connotations to it too.
Yeah.
So, keeping that in mind, the government has always encouraged private space companies to come up, both from the Ministry of Defense side as well as from other ministries. There are several use cases that are being now proposed, and these use cases ensure that all these companies have a sustained business
Yeah.
because these companies are not into consumer goods. They're not into fast-moving consumer goods.
Yeah.
These are very niche technologies required for niche use cases, and it requires a certain acumen. It requires a certain understanding of the sector, even from the end user's side.
Correct.
So the end user can't be a Tom, Dick, or Harry.
Yeah.
Yeah, the end user has to be sharp enough to understand what is the exact need.
True.
So sensitization of the end user is important. The military, of course, is highly sensitized about these matters. They know what they want. So many a times, what I've come across is uh, when startups deal with a military person, they know what kind of technology they have to offer. It is very straight-jacketed. It is very particular. There's
Right.
no scope for meandering with certain technical specifications.
Yeah.
But when it comes to civilian tech, you can meander a bit, you can experiment a bit, you can tweak a bit here and there. There is a room to play around. But in the case of militaries, it is not. And this ability to tap into talent, tap into services, tap into manufacturing of startups, and even SMEs and MSMEs has helped our national security scene a lot. And it will continue to help as both these domains, both these spheres interact and gel with each other more and more. The American space program is purely an outcome of the American military needs. Same is the case with the Chinese. The
Right.
Chinese space program is completely run by the People Liberation Movement.
Okay.
So even the Chinese, they tap into their private space companies, or as I call it, quasi-private, because there is nothing private in China. It is the CCP has some stakes in it.
Absolutely. They can't function without it.
Yeah, exactly. And in that case, we are also learning the same tricks. Both the Chinese tricks, there are good aspects of China, there are good aspects of the United States. We are learning the best practices from both the sides,
Right.
and we are assimilating them into ourselves. And because we are here to play a long game.
Absolutely.
We are not here to play a race that only lasts 15, 20 years.
True.